meeting you right where you are on your foster care journey. This is the Forgotten Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Forgotten Podcast. I'm your host, Jamie Cabe, and I am so happy to be with you. If you are part of the foster care community, passionate about serving, or simply interested in learning more, we are here for you. In every episode of this podcast, you will hear stories from men and women who have experienced foster care to one degree or another. They may have grown up in the system, are caseworkers, foster parents, or others who are here to bring you hope or encouragement. If you enjoy this podcast, please subscribe and share it with a friend. And remember, you are not alone. I hope you enjoy the Forgotten Podcast. Today, I am so happy to have Antonio Grate on the podcast with me. Antonio is an author and professional speaker, and it's clear you have a deep passion to share the hope of Jesus, the message of hope to youth in foster care, even foster care alum, even foster parents. And your personal story, which we're going to really hear today, Antonio, includes growing up in the ghetto of Chicago, your mom's addiction to drugs, not having a father in your life, even aging out of the foster care system. And that's heavy. And yet it has not defined your life. Yeah. And that's beautiful. And I'm really excited to hear more. So let's dig in. And first, though, thank you for being on today.
Listen, let's definitely dig in, and thank you for having me. I am excited and ready to go.
Oh, yes, me too. Okay. So, and by the way, I was doing a little bit of research before, to get to know you a little bit more. And I saw and I think I might even ask a question around it. And you shared 3 practical principles in a message with students about getting from where you are now to where you want to be. I loved the object lesson. You had a window, you had a chair that described a car, and you had a bed that described like rest or where you are now, right? Let's talk about your life, because I think that obviously that probably came out of your own example, your own history. Where were you? Let's talk about your life. Way back when, even before foster care, what was your home life like? What did it look like to be you as a child?
Oh man, this is good. I love it. Let's go. Okay. Honestly, I'm a kid that grew up in the ghetto of Chicago. I'm a kid that grew up in the ghetto of Chicago in the early 80s. And if you know anything about the inner cities during that time, the inner cities were riddled with drugs. And if you remember, depending on those who are age appropriate, the news oftentimes showed plenty of scenes of crime and drugs and shootings and a lot of violence taking place in the inner cities all around drugs. And there began to be a big crackdown on drugs as well. And that's when you began to see the signs that talked about say no to drugs, dare to say no, and different things of that nature. Yep. But because of the influx of drugs that was entering into these middle to low income neighborhoods and communities, what ended up happening was a lot of males, and specifically African American males, began to end up in jail. So what happened is you started to see a lot of children being raised without their fathers in their home. So in my community, in my neighborhood, the inner city of Chicago, the ghetto of Chicago, it was a toxic environment. It was a very toxic environment. At a young age, I learned that my mother was on drugs. I saw a lot of people walking through the neighborhood that was on drugs, the prostitution, the gangs, the crime, all those typical things that seem to define the ghetto is what I grew up in and surrounded by. So every day in so many ways was a challenge, especially as you begin to get older and you begin to make sense of what's really happening in and around you.
So when was that you first started to think this isn't safe or this isn't, was there a time when you're like, this isn't normal? Or, cause obviously it was your normal. Did you have a vision at all for like a healthy situation?
there's a very distinct situation that I could describe to you that caused me to shift my perspective or my eyes to be open. And I'll just share the story with you. One day, I was with a group of my friends, and it was a Saturday, Sunday morning, or early afternoon. And we were kids walking through the neighborhood wanting to do something. So we all decided, hey, we got this football. Let's go play football in the nearest vacant lot. And the thing about this game of football is that we decided we wanted to play tackle. Just know, I wasn't one to suggest tackling, right? I wasn't really with that, right? So nevertheless, I say, man, listen, I'm out here with my friends. And there was this one older girl that normally is hanging out with us during the time. She was known as like a tomboy or something like that. But nevertheless, the football game starts. And I just remember saying to myself, Tonio, listen, put in as little effort as possible because you're not trying to get hurt. Let these fools out here hurt themselves and everything. You just relax, right? So I did just that. The football game was over, and I was like, yes, I made it out in one piece. Yeah, I made it out in one piece, yes. Yeah. So we're exiting the vacant lot, and as we're exiting the vacant lot, there's the sidewalk, and we're about to walk onto the sidewalk. And honestly, I don't remember what I said. I had to say something that was mean, that wasn't likable, because the older young lady that was with us, in a very aggressive way, she said to me, "That's why your mama is a crackhead." And
wow.
Oh man. And in that moment, the way my heart broke, the multiple feelings of hurt that I began to feel was sharper than any cut I could have sustained in that tackle football game, any broken bone I could have occurred in that football game. I literally stopped walking and just started crying my eyeballs out. I mean, I couldn't stop crying. And I remember as I was crying, she was just trying to console me. She was apologizing, but the damage was already done. What was said was said. There was nothing she could do to change that. And you must also understand that as a kid growing up in this environment, I was one of those kids with the other kids that made fun of those individuals that was walking around using drugs. We laughed at them. We talked about them. But it was a whole different ball game when it was my mother, when it was my parent. And at that very moment, my perspective of my environment started to change. And I never looked at it the same again. And I began to understand that my sister was using drugs. And I began to understand that my cousin was using drugs. And we all lived together, So that moment was a very pivotal moment for me among many that occurred while living in that environment.
Wow. Now, before that time, did you have an understanding that your mom was involved in this? Or so that was like your wake-up call? Oh, my.
I had no idea. I had no idea. But afterwards, things started to make sense. It started to make sense why I spent most days living with my grandparents. And what's unique about my situation, my mother lived like a half a block away from my grandparents. But most days I was with my grandparents. And it started to make sense over time. Why? Because of the fact that she used drugs, because of the company that she kept, because of the environment, because of the dangers that I was placed in as a young, helpless child. And my grandparents understood that, it wasn't the best place for me.
Wow. Yeah, that is, I can't even imagine. So there was a point, so this is all happening before foster care.
Absolutely. Absolutely. At the age, that happened to me around the age 7. I was like 6 or 7 years old.
Oh my goodness. So there was a time then things obviously must have ramped up because you did enter foster care at some point. Walk us through, as much as you want to share, like, why did that happen? What was that day like?
I'll start here. I didn't enter into foster care until I was 15 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
But if you ask me, I feel as though I've been in foster care my entire life. Most of my foster care or life period was with in kinship care, was with family members. Like I was stating, I was with my grandparents at a very young age. So another pivotal point among many that began to take place in my life was when my grandmother, who I would describe as the love of my life. Man, my grandmother, she was awesome. She was amazing. She was a matriarch of the family. She baked cakes. She was an entrepreneur. She went to church. She just carried the family in so many different ways. She never looked stressed. She didn't yell, fight, argue, or anything of that nature. She was short in stature, but when we walked in public, she walked with this pace that was just like she was about business. I mean, she was just absolutely amazing, right? And not anything that I wanted, I got, but I just knew she loved me. Yeah. I just knew she loved me. And what I mean by that is that I felt like my mother should have loved me, but she chose drugs over me. I felt like my dad should have loved me, but he wasn't around like that. The people that I felt should love me wasn't showing me the love that I felt like I should have been receiving. But my grandmother and my grandfather too, right? My grandfather too, he was there with me. But my grandmother, man, man, she was just absolutely amazing, the love of my life. So when she began to deal with her battle of breast cancer, I saw her go through some negative changes to the point where she spent months in the hospital. And I just remember when she was at the last stages of it, you know, they sent her home really just to like come be at peace. And of course, I'm a kid. I really don't understand it. But I just saw that she wasn't the same mother, same grandparent, same grandmother that I knew. She lost a lot of weight. She lost her hair and different things of that nature. She wasn't moving around. She was basically like bedridden, you know. And these images are ingrained in my mind during those times. And I just remember when she didn't have any more fight and she eventually passed away. And when I tell you, man, it's like I died. It's like a piece of me died. It's like I was just, I didn't know what to do. I went into a very dark space at a young age. And at this time around 8 or 9 years old. Oh, wow. And I just began to struggle. I began to cry all the time, you know, in my room by myself, just not knowing what to do, just feeling so alone and so abandoned. And what's even more unique about this situation is that I was carrying a lot of weight as a child. You know, we talk about me growing up in the ghetto of Chicago, but I must mention the fact that, you know, at a young age, I witnessed my brother that was a year younger than me get hit by a van and almost die. Oh my. He spent several months in intensive care. And the thing about this situation that really caused me to struggle with it was the fact that he was trying to hang out with me. He was trying to hang out with his older brother. And I was telling him, no, you can't. And as I was telling him, no, you can't, he inched closer and closer into the street.
Oh, that is so heavy.
And a van turned the corner and hit him, right? And hit him. And I saw that. And instead of running to the scene, I ran upstairs to my grandparents. And I didn't have to say much of anything because my grandparents could already hear the sounds of the screeching tires and hearing that it hit something and not knowing what. And I just remember the feeling of guilt that just, it just consumed my heart and consumed my mind and just consumed me as my heart was racing. And I just didn't know what to do. And to know that he spent all that time in the hospital, to know that I felt like it was my fault, but to know that he did make a recovery, he did make a full recovery and he was fine was so relieving. But that guilt was still there and no one was there to talk to me about it. Right. I wasn't really able to express it. I just kept it within and just dealt with it as best as possible. But to also know that before the age of 9, I was almost shot twice, just trying to hang out with my friends. You know, at one instance, I was so close to where you could see the sparks coming from the gun, you know, and the thing about this environment is that these things happen all the time. And as an individual growing up in these environments, it becomes so normal that after you hit the ground, you get back up, you dust yourself off, you just go on with life as if nothing happened. So you think about these pre-occurrence incidents, and then you think about my grandmother dying, and then you begin to understand the weight that I was carrying at such a young age.
Right.
and the burdens that I was carrying. And so when my grandmother passed away, I just, it was difficult for me. But immediately after that, not long after that, my grandfather came to me and told me that I'd be going to live somewhere else. And of course, I wasn't with that. I didn't want that to happen. But what choice did I have? What say so did I have? And I was going to live with my cousins, my aunt, my uncles that I didn't know, and that was a big change for me. That was a big change for me. The environment technically was better, but it was a big change for me. I began to have anger issues. I began to, just battle a lot of different things. At some point, suicidal thoughts and just not understanding why my mother didn't come to my rescue, why my father didn't come to my rescue, why my grandfather didn't even keep me, just as a kid, just trying to process these thoughts, process these emotions. I just remember praying and crying out at night, asking my grandmother, why did she have to go? Why couldn't she be here with me? If she was, I wouldn't be in this situation. Feeling like no one in this situation loved me or really cared about me. Just all these different emotions that I had to deal with. And over time, you get older, you still trying to process it as best as possible. And it's a struggle most days. It's difficult most days. But in these environments, they still are expecting you to be normal, to act like everything is okay. So at the age of 15, after all those years of living with my aunt and uncles, I went back to my mother to live with them. And really how that happened was it was more of a punishment. It was more of a punishment. It was one of those things where if you don't get yourself together, if you don't do this right, we're going to send you with your mom. And the truth of the matter is, after you continue to hear that so often, you say, fine, do it. Go ahead. Sure. It becomes less of a threat. Okay, let's make it happen. Yeah. And that's what happened. And shortly after, I was there for maybe like a year and a half or so. I'm in high school at this time. My mother was pregnant. She had my baby sister, and drugs was found in her system. And that's when I officially became a ward of the state. I officially went into foster care.
Wow. Thank you for sharing all that. Yeah. That is, I say this often to guests who've gone through such traumatic experiences. We don't take lightly the impact of sharing that over and over and over and sharing that today. I'm sure that that's not easy, and I'm sure it impacts you different times and different days. So I just want to thank you for your vulnerability, because what you're doing is helping us to see you and to see so many other kids who are living this experience right now. And we need to see. So when the state entered, what was that like? How did that go? Did the police come? Was it a social worker? Did you have a clue what was happening?
It wasn't, I didn't have a clue of what was happening, because I felt like if you ask me, I feel like the transition was a very seamless transition, because like I said early in this conversation, that most of the time my living situation was kinship care, typically with some type of relative. So what happened though, even though my grandfather was much older, I went back to stay with him. They got in contact with him. They allowed me to stay with him. I'm older now, 15, 16 years old. So I can kind of take care of myself a lot better and things of that nature. So it wasn't much responsibility on him. So that process was fine. But it really was a breath of fresh air for me, because what happened was being in high school, playing sports and not having money, it's tough because, let me paint this picture for you.
Yeah.
You just had a gruesome 2-hour basketball practice after school. You've been in school all day. You're young, high metabolism, and you leave school. You're waiting on the bus, the public transportation, and you see all of the people around you, friends, whoever. They're eating snacks, they're eating chips, they're eating hot dogs, they're eating hamburgers, they're eating all this different type of food, and you're starving, like you're really, really hungry, and you would love to go in there and purchase something for yourself, but you don't have the money. So you have to just be as strong as possible and keep focused and say, you know what, if I could just get home to that can of chili, I'm going to make that chili, I'm going to do what I'm going to do, and I'm just going to be grateful for this can of chili. But that was a place that I was in for an extended period of time when I was living with my mom. Not to mention, still living in the ghetto and being older and being recruited by gang members and pressured by gang members and different things of that nature to participate in the various activities that they have going on and making a stand and saying no, even though you don't have money. And you know that by participating or joining in a gang that you will get money, and just having enough fortitude and enough strength and enough confidence and enough courage to say no to that. So when I finally officially went into foster care, it was a sigh of relief because I had somebody on my side, a social worker who was there to support me and help me in the areas that I needed help in. So that part was huge. And that part I am forever grateful for because I needed that help. I needed somebody advocating for me. Right.
Yes.
For so many years, I feel like I was advocating for myself as best as I knew how,
Right.
But now I finally had someone I feel like who was on my side, who was advocating for me. And that was a game changer for me during the latter years of my high school and even into college.
Wow. Which just makes me want to thank our social workers. Again,
Absolutely.
so often our caseworkers, our social workers get such a bad rap. But yeah, your testimony of that was the first time you kind of felt a sigh of relief because it wasn't all on your shoulders anymore.
Yes.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely. Renee Hurd is the social worker. I still have a relationship with her to this day.
I love it.
Absolutely.
That's awesome. I would be interested in talking through when you did age out, because you did go to college, which let's not just bypass this moment because you were the first, right, in your family. I mean, this is huge. So how did that transpire? And even before that, but let's talk about when you knew like you were going to age out. How were you told about that? What did that look like for you? How were you prepared?
Before I answer your question, I have to share this. To grow up in the ghetto of Chicago, where you don't have to go looking for trouble, it finds you, to experience and endure the various challenges that I was dealing with. There are a few things that really helped me during those times. And one thing was identifying a why, or identifying my why. And when I say my why, I mean my reason, my reason to so-called do what I felt was right in spite of the environment that I was in. My reason to not give up and to continue to fight, even though challenges and obstacles seem insurmountable. And I know I was talking about my grandmother, but in my grandmother's death, her life spoke the loudest. In my grandmother's death, her life spoke the loudest because even though I wanted to give up, I had a different thought. And the different thought that I had was, Antonio, if you give up now, how will you make your grandmother proud? And when I had that thought, something in me changed. And I said, I just got to continue to fight. I just got to continue to press on. And that was my why. And that's something I carry with me each and every day. And another thing that I carry with me each and every day was that they call it now the attitude of gratitude, but I call it be grateful, which is also my mantra. I carried that with me because it allowed me to look at things from a certain perspective and really from a more positive perspective, even though it was so much negativity that was happening in my life and that I was surrounded with. And in the midst of those two things, I end up developing a dream. And you talked about that presentation in the beginning.
Yeah.
We have the window where I'm looking at my environment. And then, we have the chair that I was sitting in where I'm being exposed to different things by driving. And then we have the bed, and the bed really symbolized dreaming.
That's right.
It symbolized dreaming.
Yes.
And I had a dream. And my dream, among many, but one dream I had was to reach the age of 18 alive and have not been in jail and have the opportunity to potentially go to college. That was my dream. I literally just wanted to make it out of Chicago alive. So you start talking about college.
Yeah.
Woo, you talking about, man, you talking about somebody who was overjoyed. You talking about someone who was ecstatic. You talking about someone who said, Grandma, Granddaddy, I made it. Like, I made it. Like, I made it through everything. I made it through all things. I made it through all of the challenges. I made it through all of the difficulties. I made it through all of the heartache. I made it through all of the heartbreak. I made it through everything. And I'm going to college. So that experience alone was absolutely amazing, because that's part of my dream starting to come true, you know. So I was so excited and grateful to be in college, even though, you know, I was officially in foster care and things of that nature. That helped me too, because my wonderful caseworker Renee Hurd, I remember her all the time talking to me and saying, hey, make sure you keep those grades up if you want to get this stipend, you know, stuff like that.
Good.
But it was fun. It was fine though, because we had such a great relationship. It was to the point to whatever she said I was going to do, I looked at her as a mother figure, you know.
Yeah.
So I worked hard. I gave up baseball. I made the baseball team as a walk-on, but I let that go because I felt like that was becoming a distraction. And I realized why I was in college. I was there to get an education, and I went through so much. I overcame so much. I wasn't going to allow anything to cause me to become distracted from the very thing that I've been pursuing for a very long time. So it was fine. It was good. But in regards to aging out, I just remember it wasn't much talked about in regards to aging out, other than the checks are going to stop and you just would no longer be supported. You would no longer be supported by the state. And that pretty much was it. But I strategically did things throughout my college career to try to put me in a position to where I could sustain myself.
Wow. Oh my goodness. Well, I'm so proud of you. That's so awesome.
Thank you.
That's so awesome. Wow. Okay. One thing I've often wondered is when you have aged out of foster care in college and there's breaks, did you have a home to go to?
You know, that was definitely a challenge initially, because, you know, you're in college, you're not really even thinking about that aspect per se, because you have a lot of other things you're thinking about. So the first time I went back home to Chicago for the summer, I was shocked and stunned in a way, because all of my relatives typically are in Chicago, but I didn't have a place to stay. And because of my social worker, once again, she asked me questions like, is there anyone that you could think of? And I thought about my high school basketball and baseball coach, was the same individual, because I had a close relationship with him. And matter of fact, he played a major role in me even going to the college that I went to. So I reached out to him, or my caseworker reached out to him, told him the situation, and he opened up his home during the summer to allow me to stay there. And that was huge. You know, that was huge because because he didn't have to do that. Being a kid, going back home in Chicago during the summer with nowhere to stay, it's a recipe for disaster. Yeah. It's a recipe for disaster, man. So trust me, I was and I still am so thankful for that. And then the following years, what ended up happening was I began to become a little bit more intentional, because I didn't want to end up in that same situation. So I sought out internships that paid or that provided housing and different things of that nature. And fortunately, I was able to get one of those. So during the summer months, I was interning. And for the little bit of time that I was there during the summer, I would stay like with my brother on his couch for a couple of weeks until my internship started. And that's how I managed to navigate that process.
Wow. You are passionate about bringing hope to other youth in foster care. We talked about that at the very beginning.
Yes.
Where did you find your hope? Because it's clear you have it.
I said it before, one area I found my hope was in my why. because that gave me a reason. Because when you think about it, when my grandmother died, I felt hopeless. Felt hopeless. But my why was the thing that began to give me hope. It began to give me a reason for living. It began to give me a reason, in a sense, to be successful or try to be successful. It began to give me a reason to fight. And the other aspect of it is that in Christ, I found more than just hope. Man, in Christ, I found hope, and I found validation, and I found healing, and that piece right there was the ultimate game changer for me and for my life, because growing up the way that I grew up, I felt like I didn't have any guarantees. I felt like anything that I thought would be a guarantee, it proved to me that it wasn't. It proved to me that it would fail me every time. And in my relationship with Christ, I began to realize that though I felt the things that I should have a guarantee in other people, I realized I didn't. But in Christ, I got my one guarantee. He would never leave me. He would never forsake me. And it's that aspect that I began to cleave to. It's that aspect that I began to gravitate to. And it's that thing that began to cause me to read my Bible and began to slowly over time establish a personal and intimate relationship with him. And it's that thing that caused me, when I did get to college, away from all of my family and things of that nature and environment that I was accustomed to, that's the one thing that caused me to be focused and determined to seek out a church when I got to college, because I understood the importance of that, because it helped me to establish my values. It helped me to establish my standards. It just helped me to guide me. And like I said, it helped heal me. It helped heal me. It helped heal me. And that piece right there is absolutely priceless, because that's the reason why I do what I do today. That's the reason why I talk about the hope. That's the reason why I'm going in front of current foster care children, former foster care children. That's the reason why I'm going in front of them, because it was through Christ that I began to realize that even though what I went through, it doesn't necessarily have to define me, but it can refine me. Like he can use my story. He can use my challenges. He can use my obstacles to cause me and put me in a place to go back and help others. And that's where the hope piece comes from. That's why I speak. That's why I do mentorship. That's why I do the very things that I do, because it's my way of going back with a hand and trying to pull others out.
That's awesome. I love it. I love that so much. And I'm just God is using you. It's so clear. And it's because at face value, without Jesus, there's no hope. And so it's like where, even if you had made it to college and all of these accomplishments, you would still be wrestling through feeling like not enough, feeling like you're still looking for validation, right? You're still searching for someone to love you. But in Christ, that's where, like you said, and through his church is where the healing has come. That's amazing.
Yes, absolutely. 100%, man. 100%, 100%. And the healing piece is so important, because we got to be, I just want to remind, listeners or whatever the case may be, that when we're dealing with trauma, there's various stages of trauma. But regardless of what it is, it's something that hurts your heart. Yeah. It hurts your heart. And now when things hurt your heart, what happens to your heart? Your heart becomes broken. And the more trauma you deal with, the more it becomes broken. And some of us are living with a heart that is broken in a million pieces. But the beauty of it is, it doesn't matter how many pieces your heart is broken into. God has the ability, God has a capability to go in and mend those broken pieces. And it's going to take time. It's not going to happen overnight, but he has that ability, because you were hurt by somebody you love and now you're walking around in unforgiveness. Christ has the ability to cause you to no longer walk around in unforgiveness, but to walk around and forgive those who have hurt you. Forgive those who have hurt you. And we are well aware of Christ's situation when he was on the cross, and he was dealing with trauma, and he was dealing with those that was persecuting him, and he was dealing with those that has mistreated him, those that should honestly love him because he loved them. Right. But in spite of his love for them, he was enduring the cross. He was enduring the mistakes, the sinful natures of people. But even in the midst of that, he had enough love to still forgive.
Yeah, I know.
How much freedom,
Yeah.
how deliberate, I don't even know what word to use, but there's so much freedom attached to you having the ability to forgive when someone you love, someone maybe you even didn't love, but hurt you.
Yeah.
And to understand that, to be able to get to that place in my life was monumental, because one of the first persons I had to give was my mom, you know, but when I was able to do it, it changed the whole way I dealt with her. It changed the whole way I talked to her. It changed the whole way I looked at her. And the truth of the matter is, and I don't even share this a lot, but it's because of my relationship with my mom, but ultimately my relationship with Christ, and me being in a position, allowing Christ to work in and through me, allowing Christ to shape me, allowing Christ to mold me, allowing Christ to just have full control over me as best as possible. That before my mother died, she gave her life to Christ because of me. And she died in 2017.
Oh my
around
goodness.
that time. You know, and you think about it and you like, it all was worth it. God, it all was worth it. It all was worth it. But I wouldn't have never thought that. I would have never seen that. Christ has done and is doing the unexplainable in my life. I never would have thought that I'll be speaking to youth in foster care. I never thought that I'll be speaking to hundreds of caseworkers, to hundreds of supervisors. I never thought that I would even be on platforms like this to be able to share my story in such a way that it inspires people, that it motivates people, that it brings about change in their lives. I never would have thought that, because I spent so much of my days, so much of my life fighting just to make it. Fighting just to make it. But glory to God.
Glory to God. I am so thankful, and what an awesome privilege to be able to walk your mom, you know, with your mom really, and show her the way and have her then receive it is incredible. And I'm so grateful for you and for her.
Yes.
Wow.
Absolutely.
Well, Antonio, I feel like we could talk for a long time, but I want to just give you a final moment here as we close. Anything else on your heart that you just feel like sharing with our listeners? We can be, I mean, I know we have some foster youth who listen, certainly foster parents and workers, you know, lots of different people who care about this community. I just want to give you kind of the final word to whatever's on your heart. You take it away.
Okay. Now, thank you for this opportunity, really. I think the thing that I would like to say, and I really want to speak to the foster youth, because I was you. You know, I was in that space. I was in that place. And the thing that I want to say to you is that you have a seed of greatness in you. Like I'm going to say it again. You have a seed of greatness in you. Now, I know it may not feel like it. It may not seem like it. It may not look like it. But I'm telling you, in spite of what you've been through, in spite of what you've experienced, in spite of what you endured, in spite of where your mind and your emotions and your heart is right now, you have a seed of greatness in you. And the thing about this is that the seed of greatness that is in you was in you the moment that you were conceived in your mother's womb. The seed of greatness has always been there. But unfortunately, life situations, life circumstances, life challenges, life's obstacles, unfortunately, tries to kill the very greatness that is in all of us. It tried to kill it in me. That's why I'm talking like this. And you may feel like you don't have value. You may feel like you're not worth it. You may feel like no one cares about you. But I want to tell you that there is a seed of greatness in you. And in spite of what you've been dealing with, in spite of what you've been enduring, and in spite of the negative thoughts and the negative feelings that you're carrying with you each and every day, I want to give you this seed of hope to let you know that there is a seed of greatness in you. Yes, in you. Yes, I am talking about you. There is a seed of greatness in you. And I want to tell you this, that the seed of greatness in you has been laying dormant because of your life situations have been trying to suck the life out of it. These situations are causing you to feel negative about yourself because it's simply trying to suck the life out of you. But if I can say anything, I want to begin to revive you with life. I want to begin to revive you with these words. I want to begin to revive you with these words and encouragement to let you know that there's a seed of greatness in you. All it's looking for is the proper nutrients. All this seed of greatness is looking for is the proper nutrients. Yes, I know your environment has been toxic. In a toxic environment, how can you expect the seed to grow? How can you expect the seed to grow and flourish in a toxic environment? But one thing I want to remind you of, I don't know what all you've been through, but you've been through some things, but you're still standing. You're still standing. As uncomfortable and as challenging as it may be, you're still standing. And because you're still standing, because you still have breath in your lungs, that means that seed still has the opportunity to grow. That seed still has the opportunity to wake up. That seed still has the opportunity to break through the hollow ground and begin to flourish in due time. Will you today seek and strive to get in the right environments that would give the seed the necessary nutrients that it needs to grow and blossom? Will you begin to surround yourself with positive people? Will you begin to listen to positive music? Will you begin to read positive books? Will you just begin to become more intentional than you ever have in your entire life to give the seed the very thing that it needs, because there is greatness in you? There is greatness in you. Listen, I'm a living witness. It wasn't easy for me. It was challenging. But man, let me tell you, I am seeing the results. I am seeing the maturation. I am seeing the flowers bloom in my life now because I didn't give up, because I kept trying, because I kept believing. And you know what? There is a seed of greatness in me, and there is a seed of greatness in you as well. Listen, thank you so much for this opportunity. Thank you so much for even listening. And remember, there's a seed of greatness in you. And remember also to be grateful, because it's more than just a slogan. It's a lifestyle. Thank you so much, Jamie.
Wow. Antonio, thank you so much. Well, I hope that today's episode encouraged you wherever you are on your foster care journey. We want you to stay connected, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you will never miss an episode. Also, we have great content at theforgotteninitiative.org. Thank you for watching. I cannot wait to be with you next time.